is the largest alliance and the advocacy arm of LMHPCO. I can only see four faces, but the ones that I see are familiar to me. Becky Pardue, I see you down there from Forest General. I see Tanya. So good morning. Always good to see some friends on the call. I would say maybe more even so than the moratorium legislation or, the Board of Medical Licensure issues we faced. This issue, I got a lot of emails and text messages off channel about. And so no better way than to educate you guys on what was in the final version of the bill than to have the guy who wrote the bill here with us today. So I want to introduce someone who I consider not only a professional colleague, but a close friend. He's also the only member of the Mississippi legislature who can beat me in golf. So let the record reflect here or therein that he is here today. Y'all, Representative Lee Yancy, I'll give you a little bit of his background and then I'll turn it over to him to let him introduce himself to you. He served in the Mississippi Senate from 2008 to 2012. And so very rare, I believe. Are you the only senator rep, or are there a few more that have served in both chambers?
Robert Johnson is the only other one right now.
Okay, so he's actually served in the Mississippi Senate, is now serving in the Mississippi House, came back to the House and was elected in 2019, has been serving since 2020. And the fact that he was chosen to handle this incredible legislation, this massive publicly facing legislation, is a testament to how well the leadership views him and his business acumen. He's had a myriad of professional experiences. Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been a pastor. I know you've been in wealth management for the past decade or so. So just has a plethora of what I'll call hard skills and soft skills, which make him a very effective member of our legislature. He chairs the House Drug Policy Committee. I guess he would agree that he probably is the only chairman who doesn't want to be a subject matter expert in the committee that he necessarily chairs, but he has done a fantastic job with this legislation. His cohort on the Senate side was Senator Kevin Blackwell, and he's somebody that we would also love to introduce y'all to at some point in the future. But he and Chairman Yancy just did yeoman's work on this legislation. And I'm sure they will tell you there are 174 members of the legislature, and there are probably 174 opinions on how this bill should have ultimately ended up. Before I turn it over, I want to give you all a little contextual background, because I think some people do get confused on why the ballot initiative. We hear a lot, the people voted on this. Why did the legislature have to come back and do something different? So essentially, what happened was that the medical marijuana, we call Initiative 65, was on the ballot in November of 2020, correct?
That's right.
2020. Mary Hawkins Butler, who's the mayor of Madison, Mississippi, challenged the legality of that ballot initiative, not on any particular legal grounds dealing with medical marijuana, but rather a constitutional issue that said a ballot initiative has to have X number of signatures from each of the 5 congressional districts across the state of Mississippi. Herein lies a problem. Mississippi only has 4 congressional districts. And so the Supreme Court looked at that, and essentially their ruling said in non-legalese that no ballot initiative that has passed should necessarily stand, because that is an untenable requirement. It's an unmeetable, what is in the Constitution cannot be met because we have 4 congressional districts now instead of 5. So they reversed and remanded it, and the legislature ultimately decided that this was something that we could get done. So Chairman Yancy, if I misdescribed anything, you feel free to clean up my historical context there, but I'll turn it over to you without any further ado.
Thanks a lot. The real politician in this room is John Morgan Hughes, as you can tell. John Morgan is a pleasure to work with. You've got a good guy representing you, and I want you to know that. I got back in the legislature and elected in 2019. In 2020, I was a backbencher in the House. I did not have a chairmanship. I came down with throat cancer, stage 2, squamous cell carcinoma in the summer of 2020. In the middle of COVID, when that was the legislative session that would not end. It dragged on from January all the way into October. And I missed from June on taking chemo and radiation and got a clean bill of health. But I must tell you that having cancer and having come through cancer sort of changed my perspective on things and on life. And I'd never been one who even considered marijuana as a medical product. But I didn't use it. I didn't know to use it. It's not legal to use it, but I did not know it was an option. And having cancer and losing about 30 pounds, I was told by my doctors if I lost any more weight, I would have to get a feeding tube. And I certainly did not want a feeding tube. And if I had known then what I know now, I may have tried to get some medical marijuana to help me with my appetite and to keep my weight up so that I wouldn't just waste away. But I didn't know and I didn't use it. But fast forward to the November of 2020, the ballot initiative passed. January of 2021, we had a chairman from the House of Representatives to retire. That started a domino effect. And I was hoping to get a chairmanship based on my limited seniority. And as the dominoes began to fall, the speaker called me into his office and he had one last chairmanship left. And he says, "Lee, I've got a chairmanship for you, but I don't know if you want it." I said, "I want it. What is it?" He said, "Drug policy." And my first thought was, well, at least medical marijuana is over with because it's been voted on with the ballot initiative. And little did I know the Supreme Court was going to throw it out a few months later. And then I got thrown right into the midst of negotiating the medical marijuana, medical cannabis act. So Senator Blackwell and I have been working on that since last June. We thought we were going to have a special session on it when the Senate and the House reached an agreement. And after many months of working on this, we finally came to an agreement. And then the governor had other plans and he had not signed off on what we had agreed to. And so it dragged all the way into the session. And thus, finally in January, we were able to have our day, I guess, in the sun and present our bill, and it passed by about 90% of both the Senate and the House and was signed into law by the governor. So that's kind of where we are. And certainly my experience with learning about this has been a process, and it didn't happen overnight. And I still have a lot of questions about it. But what I have participated in and what I've done is put a program in place that made us the 37th state to have a medical cannabis program. And I wanted to build walls around it to try to ensure that only people with severe debilitating conditions would qualify to use this product. I didn't want to put more joints on the street. I didn't want to have a recreational program. I'm, still consider myself a very conservative person, and I'm skeptical about those who would try to abuse this. And I did not want to create a problem. I wanted to solve a problem. I wanted to be compassionate and help people with debilitating illnesses who are in pain, who have trouble with seizures, who have trouble losing weight and can't gain their weight back, people who have HIV, AIDS, people who have cancer, to use this as a product, to give doctors another tool in the toolkit to help treat these rather than opioids. And so, basically, I want to give you just a brief overview of what this program is, and then I'll leave time for questions at the end. And John Morgan, if you can keep up with me on the PowerPoint, good luck. I'm going to go fast. What would a program look like? There are three types of facilities. You've got your cultivation facilities where they grow it. They'll be grown indoors in pots, and they'll have the lights, on top of that. And the lights fool the plant into thinking that that there are more days than there are, so they flower quicker. So by growing it indoors, you have 3 or 4 crops a year rather than just one. Plus, you control the soil, you control the things that get added into the product through the soil, insecticides, pesticides. You want a pure product when you're talking about a medical product. You want to be sure that what you have is the real thing. And so there's a cultivation facility. There's also a processing facility where the plant is turned into medicine, where it's packaged, where it's labeled, where it's tested. And so the amount of THC that's in the product has to be printed right there on the label. You have to know exactly what it is. The third type of facility is a dispensary. That's where it's actually going to be sold. So the cultivation and processing facility, they're not open to the public. You don't go there unless you're on some type of tour. The dispensary is where the product will be sold, and that's where you will go to get it. So entities that support these programs, as I mentioned, there are testing facilities that determine the purity and the potency of the product. There are research facilities. Many of our universities are going to be part of this, who are constantly looking at which cannabinoids within the plant affect which illnesses. And what we need more than anything is research on this plant, because they haven't been able to do it because it's Schedule 1. Now, Ole Miss has been doing this since the 60s. They were the only place in the country for a long, long time, 50 years or so, who was allowed to grow it for the National Institute of Health. And they really were looking at the negative aspects of it rather than the possible medicinal value. And so we need research looking into how this helps. And there is research in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, and we are drawing from that, but we need more and more research. There are transportation entities. So the product's got to be moved from place to place. It's got to be moved from the cultivation site to the processing site. It's got to be moved from the processing site to the dispensary. And so we need entities that will move the product from place to place in a secure way. And we also need these entities not to be harassed by law enforcement who are participating in a lawful program. It's still Schedule 1 federally, but we are making an exception to that rule for the purpose of those who have these debilitating illnesses. And we're asking law enforcement to also make an exception to that rule. So there are transportation entities. They'll have to be licensed just like anyone else, background checks. The product will have to be secured so that it can't be accessed by the driver, et cetera. Then finally, there are disposal and destruction entities. Every part of the plant that's not used has to be destroyed. And we want to account for every plant that's there. And I'll go into that in just a moment. All the facilities will be licensed by the Department of Health. The Department of Health will regulate the testing and research facilities. The Department of Health is responsible for inspection, regulation, and enforcement for cultivators, processors, transportation, disposal, destruction. The Department of Revenue is going to be responsible for the regulation of the dispensaries. Department of Revenue, like they do for liquor stores, has the ABC, the Alcohol Beverage Control, that regulates them, collects the taxes. That's the way that the tax will be collected from the dispensaries. How does a qualifying patient get medical cannabis? They have to have a face-to-face visit with a practitioner. We define a practitioner as a physician, a physician's assistant, a nurse practitioner, or an optometrist in the case of glaucoma. In the scope of their practice, they can't prescribe outside the scope of what they do, and they can't actually prescribe. They have to recommend or certify that a person has a debilitating condition. I'll go into those in just a moment. But we said that those would be the practitioners who would be able to certify someone. It has to be a face-to-face visit. It can't be telemedicine. The person actually has to see a physician. The practitioner would then determine whether the patient has a debilitating condition and whether cannabis could be a viable option for them. They issue a certification for the patient to take to the Department of Health to apply for their medical cannabis card. And then when they receive their card, the qualifying patient or the designated caregiver goes to a dispensary and they use the card for entry. I'll go into the types of verification systems that we have in a few slides from now, but there's a process for which you get in there and they verify that you are who you say you are, so that this is sold only to those who are the ones who qualify under this plan. They go to the dispensary, they use the card for entry, and then they're given a limited amount of cannabis. And there are a number of different types that you can choose from that we'll talk about also in a minute. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Next, the debilitating conditions. You can look at the list there. I'm not going to read them all, but you can tell that they are bona fide, genuine conditions. You can't just say my shoulder hurts. It's got to be much more than that. Their chronic pain is in there, but we have defined in the bill what chronic pain is. And it's a definition that comes from the Mississippi Board of Medical Licensure. It's something that for which there is no cure, something for which you have been treated for a long, long time. And, you know, it's not just, you know, a catch-all category. We made sure that it was not. Okay, so those are the debilitating conditions: cancer, Parkinson's, Huntington's, muscular dystrophy, on and on.
And y'all, I'll share this. If it's okay, Chairman Yancey, I'll share the slides with the group.
Sure, send it to everybody.
Yep. I'm sure this slide right here, there will be a lot of people that will want to print that and educate their frontline staff. That's a very
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. So our medical cannabis is going to have a limit on THC content. THC is the cannabinoid that is also known as Delta-9. It is the one that gives you the experience of a high, if you will. The CBD is more of the Delta-8. It's another cannabinoid that has other properties, but it does not give you the same high. Therefore, it's been legal for several years now. You see the CBD stores all over the place. But we placed a limit, THC limit, 30% for flower and 60% for concentrates and infused products. I'll go into what all that means in just a moment. Mississippi Medical Cannabis Equivalency Unit, 1 unit is equal to 3.5 grams of flower or 1 gram of concentrate or 100 milligrams of THC in an infused product. And I knew that I was never going to understand this bill until I understood this slide. Okay, so you've got 3 different types. You know, the flower is generally smoked. 3.5 grams is 1/8 of an ounce. They work on the eighths. We ended up allowing 6 units per week in a 7-day period. And any one of these equals 1 unit. Okay, so you get 6 units per week. 1 gram of concentrate. You know, to get concentrate out of a plant, you can do that chemically, or you can do it mechanically. Mechanically, you would just basically run some type of heavy press over the plant and squeeze the juice out. And then you would evaporate the liquid out of the juice, and the powder you have left is the concentrate. Chemically, you could use, Ole Miss uses hexane. You can use propane or butane to remove the cannabinoids from the plant, and then you evaporate away the solvent, and what you have left again is the concentrated powder, if you will, that can be used to create different types of products. And obviously it's more potent than just the plant itself, because, you know, what you've done is extracted it, and you've gotten rid of all of the things that were cutting it, if you will. 100 milligrams of THC in an infused product. These are your edibles, your gummies, your brownies, your soft drinks, things that you would eat or drink. And so that's how that is kept up with. Now, product possession limits. And this isn't, okay, you actually have an old PowerPoint here. So John Morgan, these numbers have changed because we had to negotiate it down to get it passed. So the weekly limit is 6 units. You see it says 8 there, but it's really 6. That's 0.75 ounces. The monthly limit, rather than 32 ounces, it's 24 ounces, which is, it's 24 units, which is 3 ounces. And the possession limit is 28 units, which is 4 ounces. So, and I've sort of described what those things are. The cannabis flower is generally smoked. The concentrate can involve a vape, ointment, topical oils, tinctures, suppositories, capsules, transdermal patch, etc. Lots of jokes been made about the suppositories, but if you're throwing up and have nausea and can't keep anything down, just like a suppository used with any other medicine, this can stop nausea. Cannabis infused products, they're the beverages, gummies, chocolates, brownies, etc. Next slide, we look at our tracking programs. We have 3. The first is the seed to sale tracking program. Basically, a tag is assigned to each plant or each seed as it is planted, and that tag will follow that plant throughout its life. And so no matter how many products or how many times that particular plant is cloned, that particular tag is going to follow it, so that when it is sold in a dispensary, they will know exactly where it originated. And if there's a problem with that batch, if there's mold in it, or if there's some type of problem, they will be able to pull every item off of every dispensary that came from that particular plant. So they'll know exactly how much is, in other states where they didn't have this, marijuana was being grown and sold out the back door. People were taking it home, and properly regulated, these tracking programs will keep up with the plants all the way through the process until they're sold at the dispensary or until they're destroyed. There's a verification system that I mentioned. When you take your card to the dispensary, it determines whether the card is valid, and it has weekly and monthly purchases in real time. It tells the people at the dispensary how much product you still can buy that particular week or that particular month. And then there's the prescription monitoring program, just like in the pharmacies, so that you can't just go from place to place using your card. It's real time, and they're going to keep up with, what you're buying. So there'll be red flags if you're buying, too many places, trying to go doing too much. Zoning, John Morgan says maybe you guys aren't too worried about the zoning because that's not really in your lane. If you want to know more about it, I'll be happy to talk about it, but there's a little bit of information about zoning. And then there's taxing. General sales tax, 7%. Cities receive their 18.5% diversion. There's also an excise tax of 5% charged at the cultivation and processing levels. And all the taxes go into the general fund. So, basically, the parts of the bill that talk about hospice, that talk about being in some type of care, extended care, nothing in the bill requires the hospice to pay for anything for anybody. Everybody's responsible for purchasing their own. If a person, let me make sure I get this right because I'm working straight from memory, and that's a dangerous thing. There are discounts for the purchase of the card. If a person is on Medicaid, I think they can get a discounted card because the card costs $25. Maybe it's a free card, but the products are not discounted. They still have to pay for them. Medicaid's not going to pay for it. Private insurance is not going to pay for it. Hospice is not going to pay for it. We made sure that we didn't make anybody pay for it other than the person who was, wanting to use it. You can regulate where it happens. In your hospice, you can have a designated area. You don't have to keep up with it for people. We made it as friendly to the business as possible while allowing it. So I don't have the bill in front of me. As I told John Morgan, there was a mistake yesterday where I thought my computer was stolen off of my desk, and a page was supposed to go to the office next to mine, 102C, and take their computer to the IT department. Instead, the page went to 102B and took my computer while I was in session. So when I came back, I thought someone had stolen my computer. So I don't have the bill in front of me right this moment, but the parts of it that deal with hospice give you a lot of freedom in how you allow this to happen. So I guess I'll stop there and let's focus on the questions that you have to make this as beneficial, for each of you as possible.
Chairman Yancy, thank you so much for this really made the law very clear, at least to me. I do have some questions, technical questions. In terms of dispensaries, I know in Louisiana, there are only 9 dispensaries. Is there going to be strategic dispensaries or a limit on how many dispensaries are in Mississippi?
So we chose to do unlimited licenses so that we would not be determining winners and losers.
Okay.
We want the market to, quote unquote, weed out those who aren't going to make it, and there will be those that do make it. The best ones will survive. And if you have a limited amount of licenses, then that sometimes leads to corruption where those licenses might be sold to the highest bidder.
Right.
So we wanted to have a level playing field where we had unlimited licenses. Now, an LLC or a company can only own one cultivation facility, one processing facility, and 5 dispensaries. That is the limit that any one entity can own. But it is unlimited as to how many licenses would be sold to, different groups.
Right. Another question is with regards to the individual, after they get a recommendation from their doctor that the cannabis would be beneficial for their condition, they have to get a card. They have to buy a card, or the card is free for Medicaid patients. And that's where it's in that process that a designated person might be assigned to go and be able to pick up product for
That's
them,
right.
correct?
That's right. And that designated person would have to go through a background check. They could not have any violent crime felonies or drug crime felonies in their background. They would have to be at least 21 years of age. I believe those are the main criteria.
When
it would be totally illegal for the designated caregiver to use the product that was intended for a qualified patient. Yeah, right.
So where will folks have to go to apply for this card?
It's a website.
It's a website. Oh,
website at the Department of Health.
Website. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And when will the availability of these cards, when will people be able to go to the website to sign up for that card?
So the website, it's my understanding that the website is up now. Now, some of the regulations are up now. I'm not sure what the exact status of all that is. They've had a year. They were ready for this last year before the Supreme Court threw it out. So they had regs already made up, and now they're having to tweak their regs to reflect the
current law
of the law. That's right.
Current law.
So,
okay.
But I think they have 60 days before they begin licensing. People. There's nothing for them to get yet, but
right.
I think they can begin trying to get their license once they've seen. But you have to get your practitioner's license first, so they can do the recommending, and then the people with the debilitating conditions, the qualified patients, could then get their license.
So did I hear it now? The physician has to get a license from the Board of Medical Licensure?
They do. The practitioner has to get a license, and they also have to complete 8 hours of continuing education before they get the license, which is going to be something they can do online. And the first year, and then they have to do 5 years of follow-up continuing education each year, basically on how cannabis can be used and has been used in other places to deal with these conditions.
The 8 hours of education is an online course that the physician can go through for that license?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And where is that online course available?
The Department of Health website.
Okay. Department of Health. Yeah. And finally, my last question is, when do you see this product actually being available to patients in Mississippi?
I'm anticipating sometime in September, October, somewhere in that time frame. Because everything has to be grown in Mississippi, right, processed in Mississippi, sold in Mississippi. It cannot cross state lines legally. Some have asked, how does it get here? And the answer is immaculate conception.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for the work that you've done and for being on today's call. John Morgan, I would open it up to folks who might have any particular questions that haven't been asked yet or haven't been addressed yet.
Hey, Jamie, this is Tanya. I don't have any questions, but this was extremely helpful. I, again, thank you for the work that's been put into this, because I was one of those as well that was very skeptical, but I feel like we've put, parameters in place to keep it safe and to keep it appropriate for those that can benefit from the medicinal effects of it. And just really appreciate you coming on to explain this, because it was very, very educational.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you.
And I just have a question. This is Becky, regarding physicians and nurse pracs and physician assistants. So will they get the message that they have to have this education prior to dispensing? How will that be implemented?
So Lee, you can take it if you'd like. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, depending on who their licensing agency is, number one, nothing requires them to recommend someone for medical cannabis. So they don't have to do it at all. Okay. They're not required to do it. The Board of Medical Licensure would handle the physicians. The Board of Nursing would handle the nurse practitioners, et cetera. You know, they're working through their licensing boards as far as, you know, what's out there, and the Department of Health is communicating with them about the procedures for being, you know, licensed.
Becky, I would also suggest that, like, for hospice medical directors, part of our role is to make sure that they're aware of the law and what the requirements, and to put out some tools that will help them understand the law. So we're wary of
you know, someone who would just basically open a marijuana patient business, you know, and so we've tried to think about how to deal with that. And one of the great parts about having this in statute rather than having it in the Constitution, where it would have been had the ballot initiative not been thrown out, is that we can change the law each year and we can tweak it and make it better. And so we're going to be watching those types of things. And, you know, we don't want this to be abused. And we know that there will be those who try to abuse it. There will be those who are successful at abusing it, but we're going to do our best to prosecute those to the fullest extent of the law who are working outside the scope of what this legislation is intended to provide. And for me, that's those who are in hospice with these conditions, who are suffering, who are in pain, who are in opioid-induced comas, who are suffering the indignities of constipation and all the other side effects that opioids produce, when this might be a way for a person to be lucid during their last days and weeks with their families.
Excellent info.
Do we have any other questions for Chairman Yancy or for John Morgan? Let's see if anything's.
Sounds like we've answered every question.
Well, at least at this point, I mean,
until 5 minutes from now.
Well, I will tell you, Chairman Yancy, we do plan to do as much education as we can with nurse practitioners and with physicians who work inside of hospice with regards to the new legislation, and we'll be doing a lot more of this before September. And pointing them and building some tools to give them information as to where they have, what the requirements are and where they have to go in order to get that license. So
John Morgan, if you would get with me on those amounts before you send that PowerPoint out so that we can send out the correct information.
That'd be great.
Okay.
John Morgan, thank you for arranging today's discussion. Do you have any closing words or anything to say before we call it quits for the day?
No, just thank you to Chairman Yancy for taking the time to be here. This is a very busy week for them. This is the period where the House takes up Senate bills and the Senate takes up House bills. So he's doing us a very kind professional courtesy. I think there's about 8 meetings going on right now, and I'm sure he's supposed to be in one of them. So thank you for making hospice a priority above your daily task. So we really appreciate it.
Great to see all of you, and thank you for having me.
Take care.